Warning: due to the graphic content in this program, viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to Women Are Evil Too. I'm Vanessa Hartwell, and today we're digging into a case out of Bath, New York. One that exposes what happens when the people we're told to trust turn out to be the very ones we should fear. At the center of this story is 45-year-old Jolene Spaulding from Corning. She wasn't just a resident of the area. She worked as a youth care worker at Hillside Children's Center's Snell Farm campus, a facility meant to protect and guide at-risk youth. But instead of living up to that responsibility, Spaulding is accused of crossing every line, betraying the children she was trusted to care for, and leaving an entire community questioning how safe these so-called safe spaces really are. Let's walk through what happened. On June 15, 2025, Spaulding was placed on administrative leave. Other staff members had raised concerns about what they described as troubling behavior between her and a juvenile resident. At that point, the facility had followed procedure. Remove her from contact. Investigate further. But just 3 days later, on June 18th, that same juvenile was reported missing. Suddenly, this wasn't just a workplace concern, it became an emergency. Later that day, police located the missing child. And where was the child found? Not at home, not safe, but inside Spaulding's car, parked at a local park. That discovery confirmed the worst fears of staff and investigators alike. Spaulding was arrested and charged with second-degree kidnapping, third-degree R-word, and endangering the welfare of an underage person. Serious charges that speak volumes about what police believe actually happened. Now let's pause here and break down what those charges really mean, because the wording alone doesn't tell the full story. Kidnapping in the second degree doesn't always mean someone was snatched off the street in the middle of the night. In New York, it can also mean that a person's freedom was restricted through coercion, deception, or manipulation. In this case, investigators allege Spaulding used her authority and her position of trust to isolate the person underage and keep them under her control. Then there's third-degree R-word. The word itself is too heavy for YouTube, but it's important to understand the legal meaning. Third-degree R in New York refers to sexual intercourse without consent, often involving victims who are legally unable to give consent because of age. That's not a relationship. That's not love. That's exploitation. And finally, endangering the welfare of a child. That charge often comes as an additional layer when someone in a position of care puts a child in harm's way. Together, these charges outline a chilling picture of power abused and trust betrayed. Now let's step into the psychological side. Because cases like this rarely happen overnight. They usually unfold through a process we know as grooming. A predator in a position of authority slowly builds trust with a child. They make the child feel seen, feel special, even loved. They blur boundaries little by little until the child no longer recognizes where safety ends and danger begins. By the time the abuse occurs, the child often feels trapped, believing the attention is affection, when really, it's a carefully orchestrated form of control. The fact that coworkers noticed signs serious enough to place Spaulding on leave tells us this wasn't sudden. There were likely subtle red flags, unusual interactions, or behaviors that didn't fit professional boundaries. The problem is, by the time those concerns were flagged, the damage was already in motion. Hillside's president and CEO, Maria Cristelli, issued a statement after the arrest. She said staff acted immediately when concerns were raised, and emphasized that the organization is working with the Office of Children and Family Services to ensure transparency and accountability. That's the official line. But the deeper question is this: if the behavior was noticeable enough for coworkers to flag it, how long had it been going on? Were there earlier opportunities to intervene? And if so, were they missed? When abuse happens in a place like Hillside, it doesn't just harm one child. It shakes the entire foundation of trust. Parents, guardians, and even other children inside the program are left wondering whether they're truly safe. And that doubt can linger long after the case itself is over. What this case forces us to confront is uncomfortable but necessary. Predators aren't always hiding in alleyways or lurking in shadows. Sometimes, they're sitting in positions of authority. They wear the mask of a caretaker, a mentor, or a protector. And that mask makes the betrayal even more devastating. So here's the bigger conversation. How do we hold institutions accountable when abuse comes from within? How do we make sure that children who are already vulnerable don't become even more exposed to harm under the guise of care? And most importantly, what can be done to prevent this from ever happening again? This is Women Are Evil Too, and I'm Vanessa Hartwell. If you found this breakdown important, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notifications so you never miss an update. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Because stories like this aren't just about one case, they're about the systems we trust, the power we give to others, and what happens when that power is abused. When women commit crimes like this, it forces us to face truths we'd rather ignore. That's why these conversations matter. And that's why we'll keep having them, right here.